Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really honored because I have actually one of the few students that I taught when I was teaching at an MBA school that actually pursued his career in sustainable finance. There are very, very, very few that actually did that. Most went to the dark side. So, Robert Earhart, thank you so much for doing this. I'm really excited to hear about your journey. So, for those that are not familiar with Robert Earhart and who you are and what you do, just briefly tell us a bit about the work that you're doing, what you have been doing, your teaching, your writing, and how you see the whole sustainable investment developing or has developed. And thanks again for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's definitely my pleasure to be here and to be talking to you. In fact, I we go back quite a long ways. We met in 2005, I believe, in the class. So we've known each other for 20 years now, and a very strange 20 years it's been. So I think I'm not going to go all the way back into ancient history, other than to say that I've always been interested in activism and environmentalism. When I was an undergraduate in the 1990s, I was involved in a number of environmental and human rights movements. I was a social worker for a while in Portland, Oregon. I was a political finance consultant for environmental and social causes in the state of Oregon, and burned out in the early 2000s and moved to Rotterdam to pursue my MBA. I was actually looking at just completely leaving behind the mission-driven nonprofit social work space, and found it Rotterdam. What attracted me there was it was the only university at the time that had a course in socially responsible investment. And it was actually the course that Robert Rubinstein was teaching. And that's actually where we first met. And I ended up coming out of that course doing an internship for TBLI. And I think the objective at the time was to set up a consulting unit of the TBLI group, which started up. We applied for some European Union funding. We started working with a number of private clients, mostly Dutch banks, and then a few other international clients. And things got up and running. I graduated. When I graduated, also started a doctorate in Utrecht, focused on socially responsible and sustainable investment. And yeah, our work with TBLI was building and growing. And then, of course, you probably remember the financial crisis happened, and that sort of it was like having the floor fall out from under you. And oddly, during the financial crisis, the first things that disappeared were the socially responsible, sustainable investment, impact investing projects that banks were working on. And I just remember that there were entire units that we were in contact with that suddenly they were gone. Just there was nobody to pick up the phone. Nobody, didn't matter if there was work in progress, it was gone. Um, so that those were interesting times. So what I ended up doing was I think at that point I spun off and I'd moved to France. And we were still working together on some European Union projects, but it was just a very difficult time to keep things moving. At that point, I was invited to start guest lecturing at different universities and in France. And I ended up at the American University of Paris teaching marketing because I needed a marketing professor. And then the next semester,
What
instead
year,
of
what
one,
year was that? What year was that?
that was 2009. So it was right as I was wrapping up my doctoral thesis. I was still doing some consulting freelance work, and I think Robert, you and I had just wrapped up a European Union project at that point, and I decided to. And those European Union projects, at least, they're a little different now. But oh, that was the amount of administrative work and paperwork was not offset by the funding. But that that I think that's a whole nother podcast. But we could yeah, so we at that point I'd started teaching just undergraduate marketing classes and then organizational behavior classes, and each semester progressively I ended up taking on more, and then finally I was full-time at the American University of Paris, in 2011 when I'd finished my doctorate and then was offered a permanent faculty position there. Since then, I published my doctoral thesis book, which was about the paradox of socially responsible and sustainable investment, and really documented ethnographically those early days in the early 2000s of that type of practice, that type of professional practice. And I think what was interesting about that time in working together in this field was it was a lot of activists and true believers and people that were deeply inspired by the cause in a way, and it had a very mission driven mentality. I think as it professionalized, is the larger consulting firms, Deloitte, McKinsey, Bain, et cetera, started addressing specifically those practices. It shifted to more, and this happens when things professionalize. I think it's a common occurrence when there are new approaches that get adopted, that it mainstreams, and it became a much more difficult space, I think, for more independent, mission-driven actors to operate in the field successfully. And I think, but at the same time, I think the trade-off has been, before we were treated a lot like nonprofit, even we weren't a nonprofit at the time, we were often treated like a nonprofit um, entity, even though our work was decidedly for profit. And so there was a very strange mix that was occurring. And so it was a very interesting liminal time and space to be practicing that type of work, sustainability, impact investment, socially responsible investment. And of course, there's so many sub approaches and strategies. Now we can go into risk mitigation. We can go into green bonds and green debt. We can look at eco investing, et cetera. There are all these different terminologies and approaches. So it's become, I think, a much more dynamic and diverse space. The work I've been doing more recently, so I established a graduate program at the American University of Paris that it's intimate and very focused on the, and I don't want to alienate anybody with academic jargon, but ontologies of sustainability and of mission-driven practice, where we actually look deep down at the fundamental assumptions about economics, about business, about management, and what drives those in order to rethink strategy, rethink management strategy, rethink financial strategy in the Anthropocene, in the era of climate change, in the era of socioeconomic inequality, in the era of increasing polarization, in an era where we're finding that despite the desires for a sustainable and cradle to cradle future, we seem to continually be moving in the opposite direction, where intentions and desire to move in that direction is just simply not enough. And so how do we actually rethink strategy and management practice in this context, starting from scratch? And so the program is very interesting. It's been fascinating to work on, very dynamic. I find the students who come in find it very engaging and rewarding. I think when in working in a program like this, the one challenge we've had is frankly marketing ourselves. The demand is out there. We hear it continually. We need to focus more on sustainability. We need to focus more on ethics. We need to focus more on how we're going to move into a more complex and chaotic future. And then we end up with more of the same when it comes to business and management education. And I find, and frankly, I'm not going to dish about academic politics, but I just think that institutions themselves are struggling with how to communicate about this and how to represent these types of ideas. And my current work right now is focused on areas of complexity and sustainability, complexity and mission, complexity and intention, looking at how strategy can be rethought and adapted in these highly complex contexts. So I use a much more philosophically oriented approach, actually looking at the biases in terms of how we understand truth in reality as a starting point to rethink management strategy. I think conventional management strategy has failed us and continues to fail us, but it seems to be we seem to keep turning back into that. The Porter models, the Ansoff matrices, the one size fits all strategic approaches, and it just I actually, when I look at management and business textbooks now, even when they do talk about sustainability, I just want to cringe. Because once again, it deals in ideal types, it deals in biases, it deals in a very I'd say one very specific interpretation of reality that is not necessarily correct. And I'm more and more drawn to these types of debates. I think we need to start at the beginning if we're going to actually have change. I think where I'm looking at in the future, and I'm kind of repositioning sort of how I'm approaching my practice now. I think the area where sustainability is really going to succeed moving forward is going to be around ideas of risk and managing risk, and we're already seeing that, and we've been seeing that for the last 20 years in the field. I have deep respect for the field of risk management. I feel like often we're Cassandras that are never listened to, and we're seeing more and more our points being proven. But I also think risk management, based on the things I've been discussing before about sort of these biases at the deepest level, has been hampered. And it would be nice to unleash a more powerful form of thinking about risk. Yeah, and I think I've been going on and on, so I think I'll
No,
maybe
no, no,
stop
not at
there.
all. Not
But
at all. This hour is about you. So take all the time that you.
I do love the attention, but then I love the attention in theory, and then when the attention actually happens, it's I find myself a bit shy. So yeah, that's the I think in terms of sustainability and sustainable investment moving forward, uh, some of the things that are interesting right now, and I think that are quite compelling. Um, there's a very interesting subfield looking at degrowthing as a strategy that I'm finding. I will say that there's a whole host of different approaches to this. Not all of them are. There's sort of the crazy degrowthing people, and then there's the more pragmatic degrowthing people. I'm sort of more with the pragmatic people. But I think that these are some very interesting conversations, especially when you look at population decline in a lot of developed countries. I'm thinking of Italy, France, Japan, Vietnam, China. All of these we're experiencing a population decline, and so I think in our lifetimes we are going to see this start to play out. And I think that economically this presents a lot of challenges, but also some opportunities. Right now, I am also a huge fan of object-oriented ontology as an approach to business education. So looking at a sort of a very simple, I wouldn't call it simple, but I'd say a very easy to communicate to business students and management students form of very fundamental ontological oriented philosophy that it is a way of having us rethink what we're thinking or perceiving in the world, is a way of actually recognizing the value of ecosystems, the value of what is around us. Very much these ideas that to be truly sustainable, we should not be borrowing from the future. Um, I'm looking quite a bit at design theory and ideas around futuring versus defuturing with how we design, not just products and our environments and agriculture, um, but and architecture, et cetera, but our systems as well, including investment and economics. So these are the things that are sort of piquing my interest now. And I think the big surprise for me lately is I've come to the conclusion that the answer, I used to be very critical of the role consumerism has been playing in sustainability, that we've been placing a lot of the burden for sustainability on consumers, where sustainability is positioned as a niche or a luxury good, often also an inferior good. At that, and I think we're seeing some shifting in that. I think consumerism more and more could be the answer, but not in the way that we've been treating it. I think consumerism can be the answer because up till now, consumerism has not been pleasurable enough. It has not been satisfying. That's what makes us buy and consume so much, is we're not satisfied. And so I'm really exploring the ideas now of a truly satisfying form of consumerism where our needs are satisfied, where we actually will buy something and that is the thing that we have and that satisfies us. I think this idea of consumption, people consuming to satisfy their wants and needs and desires, it's actually been paradoxical. It's not been doing that. So I've been exploring the idea of reframing consumption as a solution, but in a very different way. So I think that's what I've been dwelling in now. And I think all of this is driven, and I think Robert, you definitely understand this, is that all along there is this mission, this intention, this deep-seated desire to somehow affect change, be a change agent for a sustainable future. And there are, yeah, I think there are a lot of true believers, but as we both know, and we've been to enough conferences and meetings, et cetera, about this, that it often is just a platitude. Um, in fact, I'd say most sustainability as practiced now is rhetorical. It is very much driven by platitudes, by good, and I'm not doubting people's intentions. I think a lot of people and mean well, but we don't have the public policy coherence. We don't have the political will and motivation, despite everything happening, despite the dangers that we're facing being proven time and time again. Um, our stakeholder driven models have not been working. The way we've been modeling finance, investment, risk management, et cetera, are not adequately capturing this. And so, yeah, I'm definitely thinking as true believers, as people who truly mean well, that yeah, we need to somehow get out of the platitudes and into rethinking how we do sustainability, how we do social responsibility in an era of complexity. So I think that's my,
That's a
I think that's
lot
my
to
whole piece.
unpack, but I'd like to start to try to unpack. So you've been teaching more than 16 years in this field of sustainable finance. And you had two very unique characteristics, which you probably forgot. One, you're probably the only student over the 4-year period that I was teaching at the Rotterdam School of Management, which was a very depressing period because so few of the students did follow their heart or pursued their big purpose. You were one of the few that stuck with it and did it and blazed your trail and did the heavy lifting. It's not, it's not where people are showering you with money to come teach at the school in Paris. So you were very unique in that. And secondly, you were the only person that I know that wrote a PhD study talking about the precursor to the MAGA Republicans who tried to destroy our event that we did in Frankfurt. I
Oh, I
remember.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I documented that. That was actually, now that I look back at that, that was actually more of exploration of the flaws of stakeholder driven models of management than anything else. Of course, I didn't know that at the time, but yeah, that was oh God, I even forgot that person's
Yeah, that
name.
was a big deal. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
people think that MAGA started now, but that guy, what was his name again?
God, I need to reread my PhD thesis
who
again.
who tried to torpedo our work. And you wrote in your PhD, you wrote a whole chapter, nearly a chapter about that. And people should, go look at that because it's not just Trump now. It was
Oh yeah.
the Steve Malloy. That was
Steve
it.
Malloy, yeah. Actually, and
Steve
I will
Malloy.
say that in the analysis that I did, you, I remember at the time you handled that so much better than I did. You were very
He was a
cool.
punk. He was just a
Me,
punk.
I was freaking out, trying to mitigate, running around, and you kept it really solid. So that
And
was,
it was funny because people were asking me, Robert, what's the problem over here? I mean, who is this guy? I mean, the sponsors were saying, what's the problem over here? Even Prakash Sethi, who was so polite, he was the one that was going to moderate the session that we had
yes.
with Steve Malloy. And he took the time to listen to Steve Malloy's argument. Why should we kick out Max Kaiser out of this? So he was, he's very straightforward, honest. And then Steve Malloy went to the dean of the Baruch College to get to get a negative report about Prakash. And it was just so funny because Steve Malloy thought he could use his normal tricks to intimidate us and we would cave. And nobody really understood. They looked at Steve Malloy, oh, fake news, the early precursor of super fake news.
Oh,
Uh,
and
Tobacco
misinformation
doesn't
and
cause cancer.
misrepresentation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's his world. And then he looked at TBLI. Well, they complain a lot about people not doing enough of the same, but they're quite authentic. So it was great that you wrote about that. So you have had a bird's eye seat for the last 20, 25 years of you found your big purpose, you stuck with it. It's not always financially super rewarding for the talent that you bring to it, yet you stayed with it. And you were also, I remember you were quite tough. The students didn't have a free pass. It wasn't a beekeeping course that you did in
Nope.
Paris. You were very, very good professor to really, push them. In all those years that you saw, well, Bloomberg says there's 50 trillion going into ESG. If there's 50 trillion, why do we have all of these social and environmental problems? Why is there, climate change, really making a major disaster happen more frequently? So are you disappointed that it's become this sustainability finance, a fitness club that everyone wants to show their membership card, but nobody goes?
Oh, that is a wonderful metaphor, actually. Uh, having actually purchased gym memberships that I never used, I know the I definitely know the feeling. But the yeah, I would say that I used to be disappointed.
Oh,
I used to feel that the the practice of sustainable finance in particular and sustainable investment was not living up to its intentions, its
mm.
promises, or its potential. I think I'm maybe a bit more I'm a bit more empathetic and sympathetic than I
Oh,
used to be. I think that it is, especially after I started delving more into issues around complexity, especially in the fields of climate change and studies around the Anthropocene, um, looking at, especially looking at stakeholder models, where you have all of these different people from different areas representing different interests trying to weigh in and be given voice, etc. It's messy and it's time consuming. And it's unfortunately, it's easy to manipulate, it's easy to obfuscate, it's easy to be a disingenuous bad actor. I do think that, and I think what's kept me in this field and what is heartening to me is working with students who, yeah, because people love to dump on Gen Z right now.
yeah, yeah.
They love to dump on them as they're screen addicted and
Mm.
addled with memes and TikTok and whatever. That okay, there is a bit of that, and I will admit that every generation had their own idiots, so to speak. But for the most part, the concern and the intentions and the motivations and this desire to act are genuine, it actually gives me a lot of hope. In fact, this is what I think keeps me doing what I do. Is okay, I'm definitely not going to be getting rich. I will not, own a yacht stocked with high-end booze and supermodels anytime soon. But I will, it is, I do feel, I do get a lot back from it. And it definitely, I'm less fearful for the future working with these young people than I was before. It definitely gives me a lot of hope. I think it's going to be messy. I think we're going to go through a lot of danger. There will be a lot of crises, but I do see genuine interest and motivation. And I think also because the economic opportunities for younger people are more and more limited, that actually fewer and fewer young people are driven by financial rewards than what we used to see. And
Yeah.
so I think that frankly, financial success is far less likely to corrode and corrupt the intentions of younger people moving forward, just simply because we've set up an economy where that is impossible for them to achieve
Yeah.
anyway. So I think basically, to quote the 90s terminology that used to be used, capitalism is starting to eat itself. And yeah, I think that was a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's not delivering how it promises, and I think young people are aware of that. Of course, what do we do besides capitalism? I don't know. Haven't that's a field I'm not gonna. That's the third rail I'm not gonna touch.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, I very much agree. I'm not sure if Gen Z are the future. We still have difficulty getting Sam to clean his room if he comes visit, after all these years. So I hope so. We just did a podcast with a guy that you would really enjoy meeting. He started a company, a social enterprise called Rivet, which the idea of raising billions of dollars to give these super fast microloans to young people to start their social enterprises. And he's got like an incredible group, supporting him, and kind of spin off of what Bono did with Red Project. So I agree that purpose will become more important. I finally got around to writing my book. It's more of a George Carlin kind of takeoff on everything that I experienced from MBA schools, which I never knew until I was teaching there, that the rankings were based on salaries
Oh
that
yeah,
you
yeah.
earned when you leave, not on education. That was a shocker. And they told me that, yeah, we have to be careful. If somebody at that time said they wanted to work at an NGO, we wouldn't let them in because they might bring their rankings down. So there's a lot.
I was actually warned when I applied to certain business schools not to focus on my
Wow.
NGO management experience, or to make it clear I wanted to exit that field. Otherwise, they weren't going to accept me. Because yeah, you don't make money in NGOs, so it brings them down in the ranking.
And so you have done consulting, you have done teaching, were the CFO of enterprises. Have a very, broad CV. What gives you the greatest pleasure? Is it teaching,
I
writing?
would say, yeah, I would actually say I found if I will likely retire into what I'm doing.
Hmm,
I think the main thing is that it gives me the ability to scratch the itch of intellectual curiosity. Just I'm able to pivot what I'm doing. So is things change, is the context around us evolves, etc. I'm able to pivot as well. I feel that I'm just not a very good, and I realized this when I was in the job market. I'm not particularly great at yeah, of looking, I'm not like in a job applicant people understand. And so yeah, I think also by necessity, I found a good a good niche. People don't like very complex histories and stories on a CV. They want a very clear, driven narrative. And now with keywords and AI sorting of applications, et cetera, people don't like complex stories, but our lives are complex. And so yeah, I think also by necessity of organizations and the job market, et cetera, I'd probably found the right place. So
And so you started in activism and ended up teaching where you found your big purpose. Does it disappoint you if your students don't pursue their big purpose and they just want to die rich as quickly as possible?
yeah, I mean, it used to, but not as much anymore. I
Oh,
sort of feel
okay.
like if I can get them to reflect on themselves and who they are and their own values, and they can bring that into their practice, whatever that may be. If they're going to be, an account manager at an advertising firm, or if they're just simply beneficiaries of their family's trust fund or whatever, that they can, if they start to think through that on a fundamental level and bring that to what they're doing, then I feel like I've been successful. And I do think that in the long run, I'm able to somehow influence or have or get students at least thinking about these things. And so there's a sort of a saying that we say in my department: the perfect is the enemy of the good. And I'm not trying to make perfect people. Just to think about these things, to actually understand their own values. I teach a business ethics class where I start with what what are your values and what do you actually believe. A
Wow.
lot of
Yeah.
people don't actually know that. They don't think about that. A lot of students they have rhetoric around that, but then when challenged, and I try to develop assignments or things that will challenge them. When challenged, they realized, oh, I say I care about that, but actually I don't. I say I disagree with child labor by buying a lot of things that are likely made in places using child labor, and with my consumer behavior, I actually don't care about that. And they actually start thinking through, okay, well then, what does that mean? And it may turn out that okay, maybe they realize, okay, maybe they don't care about that. At least they're self-aware and being honest with themselves. But I think it then allows to start the basis of what does it actually mean to take one's values and put those into action. And I think that's the first step that is not often thought through. And so I think moving forward, if you bring that up to a larger level, my mission of sustainability, I think, is best filled by engaging in this type of education, where where I'm actually able to have people at a very fundamental level think about what is motivating them for or against sustainability. And if I'm not successful with some people, that's fine. But I think just that deep exploratory process does have an effect and an influence. And I think that the true stars, my hope is that the payoff for this is going to come long after I'm gone. That there's going to be people with that really understand themselves, that are self-aware, with really good ideas, that are then able um, to act upon that in ways more effective than maybe I have been, or that you've been, or our current contemporaries have been. So that's I think why I'm feeling well well positioned these days for my own values and my own interests and motivations.
So over the 20 plus years that you've been teaching, you've had literally hundreds, thousands of students, various students, some are with you a year or two. Have any of them connected again with you after they graduated and say, hey, you look at what I'm doing now. I followed my big purpose as you planted the seed with me, or
Quite a few do, actually.
oh,
Quite a
okay.
few. And actually, so undergrads will often get back to me if they need a graduate school recommendation. So I'll be able to check in with them then. And others are, yeah, others will. I've occasionally, about 2 or 3 times a year, I'll get a note from somebody from way back when who will just say, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know." And granted, it's rare; not many students will do that. In fact, I don't think I really did. I did that once with one faculty member,
Yeah.
just saying, "Hey, you, just so you know, you inspired me." And this was 10 years after the fact. So I do occasionally get those notes, but I'd say quite a few, especially master's students, have gone into sustainability. I've had several go specifically into sustainability consulting or into financial roles. Some have gone into management consulting. I do actually encourage students to think about sometimes the biggest sustainable thing you could do is to go into a role that doesn't have sustainability in the title and make it sustainable. In fact, I warn my students sometimes if sustainability appears in the title, you may be doing the same job as somebody else but getting paid less. So that sometimes you need to think about your sustainability mission in terms of going into something conventional and being a change agent. So yeah, that's yeah. So I've heard a few stories about that. Of students that deliberately will go. And I think now with generative artificial intelligence, I think the big mission I'm encouraging a lot of my students to think about is, okay, how do we actually, first of all, mitigate the social damage that this is going to be causing, but also how do we adapt and use it in a way that it won't actually crush us. And with every technology we've seen before, it ends up very quickly, there's all these ideals and promises,
Mm.
and then the bottom line, it ends up being quite horrible. The internet, social media,
Yeah.
smartphones, we can go on and on and on. The steam engine, it just ends up I think we our designs keep designing in ways that we don't anticipate, and I think that yeah, I think that that's the big challenge now to
When
focus on.
I remember when I was teaching or at RSM and I would give lectures elsewhere, I would always try to encourage the students that they're not weak and they're not powerless. They all felt powerless because, oh, if any recruiter just offers me anything, I'm going to grab it with both hands. And I used to show that Larry David clip where he's advising Leon how to get the job. Did you want to get this job? You got to flip it, you got to interview the interviewer, the recruiter in this time. Unfortunately, most of the students didn't pursue that because if they refuse to join and they come from a ranked MBA school, they have leverage there because it gets back to the C-suite executives, but so few um, pursued that. I hope that it's changing, that they are asking more from the companies that they work for, or if they work for themselves. So I am encouraged from what you're saying is that if they want to, fine. If they don't want to, that's fine. I'm not going to try to make them born again Christians. I'm not
Yeah.
proselytizing here, which is probably a much wiser way. But you said that it seems that the students or the Gen Z, the next gen, I don't know the terminology, millennials, Gen Y, they're actually moving in the right direction, but the business school our curriculum and the board are not. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I think, and this is just, by the way, this is my, this is purely anecdotal,
Yeah,
and
sure,
I have
sure, of
not,
course.
I only have my experience as empirical evidence for this,
Yeah.
so the
Me too. Me
generalizability
too.
is somewhat limited. But based on my experience of academic organizations, they generally are not. They trail behind a lot of the best, most effective practices in communications and marketing, et cetera. Basically, I think getting the word out of what we're exactly doing and what the student experience is going to be. Like when I look at our website, I'm like, I don't recognize my program. I like, and we're hard to find, by the way. I mean, you have to really want to really want to be involved in what we're doing to find us in the first place. And I just sort of feel like meanwhile there's a lot of management programs that are marketing themselves with promises they can't keep. It's I definitely think that education is marketed more and more like a luxury handbag or an item of clothing, or that must-have pair of pants on social media, and I find my school's not really doing that, and
Mhm.
we're getting lost in the noise, and and that's because I don't know if they should be doing that anyway. So, so yeah, that's just my impression. But I see a lot of programs oversell themselves
Mhm.
with what they can deliver to students. I would find one of the things I like about my university is that we're an urban-centered campus. We don't have a climbing wall. We don't have you know, a bunch of sports teams. We're pretty much about teaching at our campus is the neighborhood we exist in Paris, and so in that sense, we're a pretty good value for money. I think we have small class sizes, etc. But yeah, we're also for an organization as small as we are, we do tend to get bogged down in the same type of academic politics other universities do, and yeah, unfortunately I don't have a solution to that other than people say, "Oh, you should go into academic administration," and I'm not sure
Mm.
that's the move I want to make.
Yeah.
But it is, I think it's a problem, especially now, given the very charged context, at least in the U.S., for universities around their curriculum, around their policies, around accreditation. Yeah, I think we're at a critical re-examination point with a lot of this of the role and cost of education, the the way it's structured, et cetera. And but I think the risk is that right now the challenge is coming from those whose interests might not be for the good of students and education, but is fueled by other concerns and ideologies.
Yeah, I agree. I remember when I was on the curriculum committee of RSM, where they asked me to join the curriculum committee, and ultimately RSM was integrated in Erasmus University, and they did what I call the leverage management screw out, which
Yeah,
means no visiting professors. We don't want them anymore money, and we'll save money just by having our tenured professors who were teaching the same thing from their book that they wrote 25 years ago or 20 years ago.
and actually,
And that,
that one of the great thing about RSM was that we had professors that were a lot of practitioners,
oh,
yeah, like yourself, and yeah, I think that that did not serve them well, and
no,
I'm
yeah, and I remember when I structured the course, I want because the students were paying a lot of money at that time. I don't know if it's probably a lot more now, and they want to have a future. So I brought in people who made a career, and were able to teach a session because I thought that would be important. And then I was asked to give a talk at IE in Madrid about sustainable finance. And I knew IE did nothing at that time, had nothing, no course, zero. So I decided to really embarrass the dean. And I asked the audience, uh, how many of you are following a course on sustainability or sustainable finance? Please raise your hand. So no hand went up. And then I said, how many of you would like to follow a course? So all the hands went up, and the deans felt very embarrassed. Said, oh, at this, I invite you to come, teach a course. And I think I reached out to you. But it was clear he was not really serious about it. He was not really interested. And I always found that I know that lots of business schools are teaching that now, and they realize, oh, we can sell executive education programs to, our donors. But I can't really say that it's, for me, a lot of the business schools are still fraud factories where you network to find your criminal
oh yeah.
network, your
In
activity.
fact, the top business schools, they basically accept only people who are already very successful. And
Yeah.
so they leave, and they of course they're going to have a high salary because they already had a high salary.
Yeah.
So it's it's a bit of a I just always kind of imagine like a snake eating its own tail, or a cow feeding itself from its own udder. It just there's a sort of a bit of a ridiculous self-fulfilling prophecy with that. And when you look at the rankings, obviously there are all these disingenuous elements. I had a college admissions director one time tell me, "Oh, if you're low in the rankings, just create your own ranking system."
Yeah.
It's okay. That's one way of doing it.
I think I don't know if you've ever seen this new TV show called Friends and Neighbors.
Yeah,
Um,
is that the one with John Hamm from?
yeah, you should
Yeah, yeah.
watch it. It's about this hedge fund guy who loses his job, and then he starts stealing from his wealthy neighbors. He would break into their house to make a living. And it's a very, oh, it's not, there's a mystery there, but it's also a commentary on the hedge fund industry, fees, overperformance, overpayment, the whole toxic space. So I think you might enjoy it. We're coming close to the hour, where I promised you I would keep it to 60 minutes because I know you've got a lot to do. How can the people that are listening to this, apart for signing up for your course to bring in more money to the school in Paris, how can we help you?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, I think getting the word out about our Masters of Science and International Management program. We can be found online, usually I think on the third or fourth page of Google, of Google searches. Although I'm going to be meeting with the admissions office shortly to go, okay, guys, we need to really improve this. But and I think it would be great to have more students. I mean, especially students that are either have a conventional business education and would like to remap it to on a very deep level to a more sustainable future, or somebody who was an English major or a philosophy major or whatever, who wants to get into management. There's a lot you can leverage from a humanities or social sciences degree in a program like the one that we do. So getting the word out, I think, would be a big way. But I think just more broadly on the sustainability mission, and actually moving us towards a sustainable future. Um, yeah, I would say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good with
Mm,
this. I think we need to try every possible different avenue. I would encourage people who are listening or watching to consider actually going into jobs that aren't sustainable,
mm,
going into roles that are deeply conventional and problematic, and acting as change agents. Uh, I think there is this idea that somehow people will go into a career and be corrupted by the context that they face. But I do think, especially younger people, more and more are, I think, very mission driven. So definitely think. Um, if yeah, if, I think the other thing that would be very helpful to me is I'm always happy to go and offer courses elsewhere. Either on a training level, I would love to do work with risk managers and looking at
mm,
complexity and risk, and actually sort of deeply exploring that and looking at possible ways of remapping some of the risk management models to better take that into account. Would love to actually work with universities who want to build a more mission driven, values driven forms of sustainability into their programs. I would be happy to do that. But I think the best way folks can help me is to actually, yeah, to more better understand themselves to more effectively fulfill their missions. Um, Ideally, that mission is sustainability. If it's, for example, genocide or environmental destruction, well, then you can go toss off, as far as I'm concerned. But
no, but I really admire the fact that you've stayed the course, because so few people, you have no idea how many people over the 25, 30 years we've been doing this, knock on the door and they all want to learn tricks. How can I cut ahead of the line without, paying my dues? How can I did not grab the shovel and do the work and basically learn a few things, or they trying to reinvent themselves. There was a woman from Singapore who worked for this network of family offices, and I offered her, if you want to join the TBLI circle for your members, I can happy to give you a discount. So, she, of course, she never really delivered on that. Then after years, she contacts me and to sit and we have a talk, and I give her our nickel tour of what we're doing of trying to change the financial system so it works for all, and the conferences are just an educational tool, and the fundraising, etc. And after that she asked me the question which was the trigger for me. Okay, I'm talking to the wrong person. She says, so what's your business model? And she didn't hear a word that I said. She didn't hear the purpose, the mission. She only was looking, how can I write lots of hours quickly with pretending people to be an expert. And now she speaks on panels about, sustainability and CSR,
Yeah.
and you're the real deal. Yeah, in case you didn't know it, you're one of the few that have really done the heavy lifting, don't, are not always crediting, give you the attention, and the school's not helping you with the SEO searches on.
But once again, it's not just it's every school. Frankly,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
they're not
it's
good at
fine.
communicating this. Yeah, no.
That's fine. But, the ones, as I said, the ones doing the most talk the least, and the ones doing the least talk the most. So it's really, been a pleasure and an honor knowing you, because knowing one of the few that actually stayed the course, didn't deviate, didn't become partly pregnant. He went all in, and yeah, this is not a side gig for me. This is my gig. And you should be very, very proud of that, that you've done that, and you've, reached many, many students. I don't have always, your patience. I much rather do the Larry David Leon flip it, where you're saying, no, you want to go, toxic waste place. See if you can change some things over there. So you're a better man than I, Gunga Din, as Douglas
I wouldn't
Fairbanks
necessarily
said
say
in
that.
the
I
movie.
actually learned from, I would say you still outpace me in this field by many more years, and you've pivoted to maintain your mission so many times that, yeah, I'm flattered that you're flattering me, but frankly, I mean, I
No,
think
it's true. It's true.
you're
There,
you're
there,
you're
there
you're
is
far
you.
ahead of me in most of these regards, and I
No,
definitely.
Ricky, my wife, who has a great bullshit Brahma, also says he's a very authentic guy, who does his thing and just, kind of gets on with it. And it'd be great if more in the academic world were as committed as you are, and they just often don't get the recognition. So I'm very happy that you found the time to do this podcast. I'll give you the link. Sam will process it next week. So I'll give you the link for the replay so you can listen to
Oh,
it,
okay,
and
perfect.
tell Gregoire I'm actually working today. I wasn't at a cafe on the corner all morning.
Yeah, and there's actually, oh God, there's one thing I forgot to mention
Oh,
in all of this podcast. So I just recently joined an angel funds board.
cool.
Yeah, it's Weekend, the West Coast Angel Network. Just for the sake of transparency, my sister is one of the directors, so that's
Oh,
how I
okay.
got involved. But they're actually doing some very interesting mission-driven investment approaches, and they have a fairly diverse board. It's an equal buy-in for all of the partners, and so just definitely something worth looking up. At some point, I'd love to talk with you about
Oh,
that.
of course.
But yeah, I think it's been very interesting to be involved, and yeah, once again,
Happy
I am
to.
biased because my sister is directing it, but
Of course, but happy to help anyway. You might want to also check out a French organization, which is really quite cool, called Make Sense, makesense.org.
Ah,
They
I think
have
I've heard of that.
it's a big network of, angel and early stage investors. People there are very nice. If you need an interest, she's also one of the TBLI Circle members, so you can reach out to her, Miriam. And very cool. Actually, there's a lot happening in Paris. A lot of
Oh
people
yeah,
don't.
yeah. There's
I was amazed at the metamorphosis of the city to a bike-friendly city in such a short time.
Yeah, there was
I know.
it was a bit controversial. And I will say that
Yeah,
right now I'm terrified. All the jerks that were on the metro are now on bikes, so it can be a bit terrifying. It's not quite the Dutch. It's a bit chaotic, but we're getting there. We're getting there for sure.
yeah,
So
but
yeah,
she's also closed down streets to make them more pedestrian friendly.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah,
it shows that
that's been
in a
great.
short time you can reinvigorate the city as a place that you want to live in and not just a place that you drive through.
Oh
So
yeah, no, it's yeah, definitely yeah, Paris is definitely transformed in I think some very good ways. I think there's still quite a bit of work to do, but yeah, definitely it's night and day from when I moved here in 2006. So yeah.
I'll send. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate your time and what you're doing. Let me just.